For the folks who are just joining, we're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Thank you for coming to our webinar. We're very excited to have you. All right, we still got some people coming in. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes, guys, so hang tight. Trey, Danny, if you guys want to turn your video back on, just make sure it's working correctly. People can see your pretty faces.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
For those that are waiting, we do actually have a Q&A section here at the end. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask about, field sales, outside sales in general, or about the report, please do put those questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're going to be getting those at the end. All right, we're going to be getting started in about 1 minute, folks. If you have questions for us, as a reminder, please do put those in the Q&A section. Thank you guys for attending. I know we're all busy, taking time out of your Tuesday to listen to us talk about a very exciting topic.
We're going to make it worth your time. Guaranteed.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of the Inside Scoop on Outside Sales podcast. For those who aren't aware, it is the leading source of thought leadership content for the field sales, outside sales industry. Today, we're going to be talking about a very exciting report, the State of Field Sales in 2023. For those who aren't familiar, this is the 4th version of this report that we have put out, and it covers all things field sales, talk more about what that looks like in a second. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to introduce our two speakers for today. Trey Gibson and Danny Pattison.
Hey.
Gentlemen, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hey everybody, thanks for joining us. My name's Trey Gibson. I'm the
Can't
founder
hear
and
ya.
CEO of Spodio. You can't hear me.
Might be me.
I can hear you.
Danny, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Christian side. Yeah. So founder and CEO of Spodio. Back before my days in technology, I actually did pound the pavement as a field salesperson and then had a field sales team. So not only have I done the work, but now get to work with hundreds and thousands of companies and field sales reps across the world. So I think I have a unique point of view in terms of information that I can bring to you. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, so my name is Danny Pattison, and I'm on the product operations team here at Spodio. So I've been with Spodio for about 5 years. Been on the sales team, account management team, and now on the product team. So really just kind of an overall, jack of all trades. Interact with a lot of different Spodio customers as well as the product to, kind of solve challenges and help the field sales world.
All right. Yep. Looks like Christian's having some trouble here.
Sorry about
Can
that,
you hear us
guys.
now, Christian?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
All
What's a
right.
webinar without a little technical difficulty?
Right. Okay, so before we jump in, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. We are going to be covering a variety of topics, including field sales trends and challenges, sales process. We're going to showcase some benchmarking data. This is some really cool information. I doubt anyone on this call has had access to in the past. So we're really excited to be able to share some of this stuff. And then we're going to talk about technology adoption and strategy. Of course, we're a technology company, so we do want to talk a little bit about that. And then the final piece is going to be, we're going to try and leave about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A time at the end. So as I mentioned before, please do put your questions over there in the Q&A section as you're going through this, and we will try to get to them at the end. Before we jump in, I do want to give everyone some context about what this report is. The State of Field Sales Report is the 4th edition of the report that we published, and it's really the only place for research of this kind focused on field sales, outside sales. There's a lot of research out there focused on sales, but a lot of it is catered to inside sales teams. And obviously, the folks on this call are not necessarily interested in all that too much. So we decided we wanted to make be the comprehensive provider of this sort of information. It is a fairly lengthy report. You're more than welcome to download it. We'll make sure you get a copy of it for attending. But it does include, it's a wide range of audience members, sales reps, sales managers, sales leaders, the whole spectrum. Companies large and small, B2C and B2B. So we're going to be talking a bit about broad level feedback, and then we'll be diving into some of those subcategories as we get to it. So with that, let's dive in. So the first question I like to start out, just to kind of level set with you guys, is we asked a pretty straightforward question. Do you think field sales is getting harder than it was last year? And 40%, almost 40% of our audience said yes, they actually do think it's getting harder, which is a significant number. Trey, I know that you've had some conversations about that with some audience members. Do you want to provide any context about that?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in there. There's many factors going on this year that could make it harder. First is the economy. We've all heard that the economy is a little bit tighter. Interest rates have raised. So for our customers that do things like offering financing, or the bulk of their purchases are through financing, it's harder to get approved. So that's naturally going to make it harder to sell. The purse strings are tighter. Everyone is being more conscious of expenses, and so every purchase is getting reviewed and scrutinized at a level that it wasn't happening last year. Right. And so that just makes it tougher. The sales teams have to be excellent. You have to differentiate your product or service better than you have in the past. So having sold being a field sales rep in the last kind of big recession, 08, 09, it's challenging. And so you have to be really good.
Yeah, and
Danny,
just
anything to add to that? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think everybody kind of knows the world we're living in and how it's evolving from a technology standpoint, right? Like the releases of the chat GPTs and all this automation and technology out there, it kind of makes field sales almost like a older art form, but also a valuable art form, right? So it makes it a little bit trickier to kind of justify and show, the value behind field sales. But at the same time, I think that's really like the challenge that a lot of, Spodio customers, but then just field sales companies take on, right? Is like in an ever evolving world of technology and automation, adding in that in-person interaction to your sales process. Yes, it might be harder and kind of a constantly more challenging space to be in, but definitely has its rewards and kind of sets yourselves apart as a differentiator in the sales world.
Yeah, we've asked different versions of this question over the past 3 editions of the report also, and consistently, I think what we're seeing is it is just generally getting harder year over year. This is by far one of the bigger inflection points that we've seen. So we asked why. What are the things that are causing this additional friction that may not have existed in previous years? And what we saw was kind of interesting. So this graph here on the left shows a blended average of the reasons why people have told us that it's getting more challenging in field sales. And then to kind of provide a bit more context for the audience that you may be interested in, you have the top 3 listed to the right there. Trey, I know that you've talked specifically already. You mentioned a few of these examples before. You want to go into any deeper discussion on any of these?
Well, I think the interesting one, and Danny alluded to this a little bit, is the buying behavior. And so what we're seeing now with the internet and all the tons of information that is available is people want information before they make a decision. It's why it's out there. And so as a field salesperson, you might have to do some more education or be prepared to do more education, have some enablement material or marketing material that can do that. And along with that is having a really good like follow-up process. What we're seeing from some of our customers is that they are having to educate the market or customers more through more of a long-term kind of nurture. And so building that into your process could be effective. Of course, the slowing economy is one that we see now versus more so than the last couple of years, other than the COVID year, of course. But in a slowing economy, you're just probably going to have to do more. You're going to have to be better. By doing more, you're going to get in front of more potentially qualified prospects and do better than the competitors. Like you can see the competitive pressure down there. And so that's all part of being a salesperson in a slowing economy.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me about this is, you hear about the housing market and then just businesses and their struggles, right? And so it's like, you're lucky if you find somebody that's, able to even buy a house in this market or, keep a business afloat in this market. And now you're trying to sell to them on top of that. So I think that's really where kind of the change in the buying process has come in. There was a time where you could probably just knock somebody's door and sell a lot easier than it was. There wasn't the internet, ways of doing research, comparing competitors and things like that. So just kind of knowing this change in the overall world's buying process and how it is switching to more of a digital, I'm going to do my research and see what's out there kind of thing, definitely can still complement the field sales process, but something to be aware of, especially as it continues to become more and more common.
And I think the part of the whole reason that we do field sales is to get face to face with customers. We know that by building that relationship, by getting face to face, we have a higher win rate. So more of the opportunities we get closed. That's why we do field sales, is to build that relationship, get face to face. And so you as a field seller or as a field sales company, be thinking about how can I get more face time with my prospects and customers, and that's going to lead to more optimal results.
Yeah, I think this slide, if you see, it's just these are the external challenges. These are the things that are happening to our customers, our audience members, the things that are driving a need for change internally in the organization. the next slide's sort of a continuation of this. It's what are the internal challenges that maybe those external factors are creating or highlighting. There's an old adage about, when times are tough, you start seeing the cracks a little bit more in your sales organization than perhaps you had before. Trey, and you've talked to me about this on the side previously. What's your take on this?
So yeah, if I look down at the commonalities between the B2C and the B2B, you see a lot on accountability and difficulty, like kind of the visibility and accountability side. And when times get tough, you really need to be able to understand what's going on so you can make decisions based on information. And so, that's where it comes down to getting that visibility. On the turnover side, you see that on the B2C front. A lot of the B2C B2C companies are 100% commission sales reps, right? And so the turnover is naturally higher, whereas on the B2B side, it's more of a W-2 salaried position. And so they're investing a little bit more. I will tell you that in conversations I've had with B2C, forward-thinking B2C companies, they are moving more towards a W-2, potentially base or salary plus commission or bonus type approach in order to not have the high turnover. We know that sales rep turnover costs the company a ton of money. You have to retrain, rebuild pipeline, and all of those things. It takes a lot of time. And so what we're seeing is forward-thinking companies investing more in their sales team up front. That way they can produce for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that too as well, right? Because Spadio, one of the things I've always liked about Spadio is we serve so many different customers and industries, right? And the high rep turnover, managing my team, are they out there working? What are they up to? That's always kind of a common denominator for across every industry, B2B or B2C, right? And so we just discussed those external challenges that all field sales companies are facing. And so when those challenges, get worse externally, it kind of turns up the pressure internally, right? To make sure that we're doing everything we can to have a team that, one, stays with us if we're investing and committing to them, but then two, just making sure we have visibility into what they're doing, right? When Trey ran his door-to-door team back in the day, he always had this saying that he would just send them out and really didn't have any visibility or, knowledge of who's actually, going places, who's having trouble with their pitch and their selling motion. And so in difficult times like this, I think things like that and having an eye on it is even more important, right? Because in a lot of ways you can clean up your internal processes to better address and confront those external challenges that your customers or company faces.
Yeah, I think high rep turnover is also one of those things that is a little bit puzzling. What's causing that, right? Is it those external factors? Is it things that you can control? If you were to be able to manage them more effectively or help them be more accountable, would your turnover be so high? It's really about like the baseline numbers and trying to figure out, where's that opportunity for improvement. So, anything else on this? Okay. So then we asked, okay, despite these challenges, and you're feeling like it's more, things are more difficult, we asked a very important question: how is your team actually performing? Are you growing your revenue year over year? And the results were pretty interesting. Trey, I know that we talked about this one as well. Go ahead and give this some context.
Yeah, so I guess the good news is the majority of companies out there are increasing their revenue despite it being more challenging. And so I think that goes to show the how field sales can be effective and why we're so passionate about it, obviously, and you are too. However, looking at the B2B side, there 79% of the respondents increased revenue compared to just 59%. So that's interesting in the sense that it's a stark difference. And so the question becomes why? Why did B2B sales teams 79% increase revenue versus B2C at 59? If I had to guess, I would say that a little more to guess, but on the B2C side, the interest rates are really affecting the purchasing. From what we've heard from our customers, is like that the interest rates going up, it hits really hard to consumers, and it's more of like I can't make this purchase even if I wanted to. Versus on the B2B side, businesses have budgets set aside. It might be tighter, But with the right product, service, process, we can still continue to make those sales.
Yeah, and this part of the report was actually kind of interesting to me, right? Because basically everything leading up to this was the negatives, right? Here are your external challenges, internal challenges. You'd think we'd get here and it would be maybe a step back, right? Like companies are losing revenue or not growing. But the fact that both B2C and B2C and B2B are growing in such kind of difficult times, to me, like is a good sign, right? It means that field sales is still just as valuable, if not more valuable than ever before. And then just kind of, again, going through those internal and external challenges to figure out where we can fine tune it, just kind of lets us know that we're investing in the right teams and the right sales motion, because clearly they're both growing year over year on average. And so definitely a good sign for just the field sales industry in general.
Yeah, I guess one thing that's not notated on here is the comparison point to, our friends over with inside sales teams. And I will say, well, I don't have the exact number. I can say that field sales growth research done in this report actually is outpacing inside sales counterparts. So it is, despite all the challenges, field sales remains very resilient and not only, a consistent performer, but also, a viable go-to-market strategy in many ways, with some big benefits over inside sales.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we're trying to compare ourselves to them, but it's kind of hard not to sometimes. Okay, so just as I wanted to just mention again, if you have questions, there's a couple that have come through. Please do send them over. We're going to get to those in just a minute. Now we're going to switch to sales process, the benchmarking, some more information about what people are actually doing in their own sales organizations that could be helpful. The first one, I think we asked a very specific question: how much time are managers spending on a weekly basis coaching, managing their teams? Trey, take it away.
So no surprise, high performing teams spend more time on coaching. If you look at the graph above, 3 to 6 hours a week is kind of where the bulk of it falls. I mean, some are spending more than 12 hours a week, and there's different ways that this can take place. What I've seen be effective, and what I hear some of our customers doing is there's a set time for group coaching, meaning we're going to focus on something that's applicable to the whole team. And that is, it's a set meeting, maybe every day, or definitely once a week, where we can work on just sales process, sales methodology. And then there's an additional layer of that, which is the one-on-one coaching. Meaning if you, Danny, are struggling with one specific part, then I can hone in on that. So if I have visibility to what's going on, I can pull Danny aside and say, hey, let's talk about this point or that point, and like laser target or sniper shot his area and coach to that. So there's some group coaching and then some one-on-one coaching that the manager are doing. And this shows it, right? If you just hire your sales team, you send them out there and you hope they come back with sales, it's just not going to happen. You have to invest in coaching. B2B sales managers do spend more time on coaching. Again, I think that goes back to the investment that they make up front in terms of base salaries and things like that. They're going to be a little bit more bought in to making sure that they succeed because of the level of investment that they've had on them, versus on the B2C side, if they're 100% commission, look, there's less investment going in oftentimes to see them be successful, because you just hire more people.
Yeah, and I think I've had the privilege of working with several field sales managers in my time at Spadio, and I think the common denominator among most all of them, or at least the successful ones, is that they love being out in the field with their reps, teaching them like the art of actual selling, right? And we have a phrase at Spadio called sharpening your axe, and that's just making yourself better at a certain skill set. And I think the value of field sales, right, is this in-face time you have with your potential customers. And so making the most of those interactions is obviously a big piece and the reason behind the coaching. But then, areas that like managers don't like spending their time is all that admin stuff, right? So managers don't want to be bogged down at the office, sitting there, making sure everybody's out working, running reports, checking data. They want to be actually out there, making their team better sellers. And that's where I think this really kind of ties in nicely to just the overall field sales report, is that it just still emphasizes the importance of that sharpening your axe notion, right? Making sure your managers are out there, making your sellers better at the art of selling and not wasting their time elsewhere doing like admin tasks or things that are, cutting into this amount of time that they spend coaching each week.
Yeah, I think, I love what you said, the comment about how managers would spend as much time as they could managing and coaching their team, if it weren't for all the other things that eats up time on a typical work week. So how do you find that time? How do you carve that out? Is the real challenge. So similarly to the question we asked about sales coaching, we did ask, how is a sales rep? What is their time? How is that allocated on a weekly basis? This one's a bit more challenging to discern from like overall, the numbers may not be super helpful, but when we look at, segmentation criteria, you can get a more meaningful look at that. Trey, what jumps out at you?
Yeah, so we've asked this question over the years, and it's been similar, and actually external reports have done the same. What stands out to me is if I add up, let's just take some of the non-selling type activities: admin tasks, entering info, internal meetings and training, preparation and planning. That's basically half of my time that I'm spent not selling. And so what I'm thinking as a rep is, how do I optimize that? How do I get more in-person selling? We've already talked about, as a field seller, the only reason I do field sales is to get face-to-face. And so how can I get more face time with prospects and customers? And so that's what I'm thinking about doing if I'm a rep, or also just a sales leader or an ops leader, right? Is how do I get more time back to in-person? And oftentimes we see the virtual and phone selling is used to tee up that in-person selling, right? So I'm setting meetings in order to get face-to-face. And so, yeah, that's what sticks out to me is like, boy, half that pie chart is spent on non-selling activities. Flipping over to the activities, but I was really surprised to see this, that B2B sales teams are doing more activities than B2C sales teams. That was super surprising because typically, on the B2C side, you see them go, bang on, 100 doors a day, versus on the B2B side, it's 10 to 25. But hey, this is what it says. So this is what we're reporting.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that thought Trey had at the beginning there, when I saw the in-person selling wedge at only 20%, it was kind of a big surprise, right? Because we just talked about inside sales versus having a field sales team in general, right? And the importance of those in-person interactions, the value of that face-to-face meeting that you have, right? And so the fact that that value, the most valuable piece of field sales selling, is only taking up 20% of your team's time on average is kind of mind blowing, right? Because you could look at an inside sales team that doesn't even do field sales, and they pretty much do every other wedge of that chart minus the in-person piece, right? So, I think that's, kind of the thing that Spodio tries to help enable people to do is, in my perfect world, 100% of your time would be just in-person selling, and you could automate or figure out all that other stuff on the back end. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. And, our big challenge is figuring out how we can cut down on those other percentages to give people more time doing the actual biggest value add of field sales, which is the in-person piece of it, right?
So let's unpack that for a little bit, because I agree with you, Danny. So how can I, as a rep, get more time in person? And, one of the things that's the easiest is just proximity. And so if you're driving all over your territory or your area, appointments and visiting customers or prospects, then you're wasting a lot of time. And so focusing in an area, right? Being thoughtful about how, that prepping and planning, while it's technically not selling, if you're doing it properly, it should be able to expand out the time that you spend selling. So that have a process on how you prep and plan, so that it sets up more time for you to actually be conducting sales activities. The more sales activities you can do, the more sales you're going to make. And as the external challenges of that slowing economy, you're just going to have to do more, right? You're going to have to get in front of more people. You're going to have to do more. And so sharpen your axe in the prep and planning. That way it gets you in front of more customers. And, the virtual phone selling, I don't want to talk too much about our product, but there, we rolled out during COVID the ability to call, text, and email in Spodio because we saw that many of our customers wanted to use those methods in order to tee up more in-person time. And so that's kind of a more hybrid approach that we're seeing across both B2C and B2B channels.
I think the other
Yeah.
thing that could be worth mentioning is, if one thing I've heard pretty frequently since joining this industry is that activities by themselves don't necessarily matter if they're not spent on the right leads, the right prospects, right? So preparation and planning, prospecting and research, making sure you're using those times more effectively to make, so the activities, if you have a limited amount of time, you're at least spending those on the high value targets or the high value customers. Dan, you were going to say something.
Yeah.
I cut you off.
Yeah, I always like to pepper in a good sports analogy. So I look at this in-person percentage as almost like your at-bats in baseball, right? So if you're a baseball team and you want to score more and win more games, there's kind of two ways to do it, right? You either need to have more at-bats, more chances to, hit the ball, put the ball in play, or you need to do better with those at-bats, right? So like, hey, I can't be striking out every time I get somebody at the door, and I also can't not be going up to the plate to begin with, right? So I think that's kind of the two main aspects of fixing that in-person selling wedge is, it kind of ties back to the coaching. Maybe I can coach up my reps to make sure that they're making the most of those at bats that they get at the door. But then the bigger one that is just, regardless of coaching and how good your reps are at their actual pitch is just those number of at bats, right? Because even the most mediocre hitter in probably any level of baseball, right, is going to get a hit and get on base if you give him enough at bats, right? So I think that's just kind of the double-edged sword, right? Is like, how do we make the most of those in-person interactions that we do have to make them the most valuable as part of our selling process? But then also, how do we get more of those in-person interactions as well?
Awesome. So we actually had a question about this pop up. I'm glad we preempted that, but I think that's the top end of the sales process, right? Just trying to get in front of as many people as possible. This is the bottom end. This is, if you meet your goals up top, what are your goals on coming out the other side look like? So we're talking about quota attainment here. We have a blended average and then average by vertical. Trey, what do you see in here?
Yeah, so I know in the Q&A, Dan had asked about which percentage of B2B teams are making their number, achieving their quota, and it's 61%. All the blended is 57. So, 43% or almost half are not hitting quota or, their expectations. And that's pretty low, I would say. What you're wanting to see is around 75%, 75% hitting number. But with the external challenges that we're seeing, maybe this is more of a this year type of thing. We are seeing B2B hit their expectations more, and I think as you think back through the slides on it kind of makes sense, in terms of how the B2B side is approaching it. It's not that far off, right? So it's 53 versus 61%. But either way, almost half of field sellers out there right now are not meeting the minimum expectations.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting about when you hear the term quota attainment and target, right? It's such a broad term, right? Everybody has different quotas, different targets, but I do think that there are a lot of factors that impact this, right? It's not just like a single, hey, sell more and you can have all of your reps hitting their quota. I think it kind of ties back to a lot of those internal challenges we saw previously, right? It's a matter of, do I have the right people in place that are willing to strive to hit their quota, right? Have they been trained and coached up on what they need to be doing? And do they have the tools and, knowledge of where to go and what to do with their time, right, to realistically be able to hit these numbers, right? So I think some people might think of that and be like, wow, that's so complicated, where do I begin? But in my mind, it's an opportunity, right? Because you could find even just one area of those internal challenges that you could increase or improve on, and that would ultimately move the ticker in the right direction for your team's quota number. So definitely a complex problem, but I think the value there is that there's a variety of ways of addressing it and gradually moving this number higher up in the future.
So when I think back to the internal challenges, right, there was activity and then kind of process. So activity, is my sales team doing the right number of activities with the right prospects or customers, right? That's kind of where it starts. If we're not doing activity, nothing else really matters. Number two is on the process. Are they following the right process? And your sales process is probably unique to your company or your industry, but it can be down to just, are they even working their territory like you want them to? Do they know your product? Do they know your value propositions? Are they relaying that properly to the prospect or customer? And then when you go to the pie chart on where your reps are spending time, it's like, wow, only, if I add up the virtual and in-person selling, only about a third of my time I'm actually selling. And so I'm thinking, again, how do I shift that pie chart? If I shift that pie chart, this 57 number probably gets closer to that 70, 75, right? Not everyone's going to hit quota. Like it's just that's not how it's going to be. But if, 3/4 are, then, you're probably in a really good spot. So if I'm a sales rep, sales leader, I'm thinking about how do I shift that pie chart, and in return, it should shift this 57% up.
One other thing, you were talking about the internal challenges. The one that you didn't mention is the rep turnover. In the report, there's actually a whole section on rep turnover benchmarking. You can get some more information about that. But one thing we hear pretty commonly for people who come to us, and people we're interviewing for this type of research about rep turnover, is they also have a fairly low quota attainment. And so of course your turnover is going to be higher when almost 50% of your reps are not hitting their quota. They're probably going to exit themselves if you're not doing it for them, and that's just a real challenge of this type of sales motion. So high turnover is usually indicative of other issues that could potentially be solved to help prevent that from happening. All right, we're on the final stretch. As a reminder, Q&A, we're coming up. We'll probably be getting to it in about 5 minutes. So we wanted to talk about, we talked about COVID earlier and kind of the growing importance, like that's really changed some of the conversation about technology being used in this space. And we wanted to ask, how important is technology to your sales strategy, to your team's go-to-market strategy? We got some pretty interesting results here.
Yeah, so I think what's important is, if we hadn't mentioned this before, is like this surveyed hundreds of sales people and sales leaders, not necessarily Spodio customers. So it's not like we're asking our own customers how important technology is. That'd be a little too self-serving. But they report back that technology is very important. High-performing teams put more value on tech. And there's, on the B2C and B2B side, it's kind of, the same. So they report back. So 33%, it's extremely important. 32% very important. So you add those up, it's like, wow, if you're not adopting technology as a field sales org, then you're missing out, and you're probably one of those that are not in the growth, the 59 or 79% that have grown this year, right?
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that with what we've seen on like the Spodio side. So back in the day, and this is maybe circa 2017, we used to joke that our biggest competitor was pen and paper, right? Because a lot of companies that we would introduce Spodio to, they didn't have any sort of software or technology in place for managing their field sales teams, right? And so I think just the world, and then you could argue that it's post-COVID world or just the evolution of technology and business in general, but the world is just kind of moving more and more towards this value of technology, and it's kind of gotten past the point of, it used to be where, we could probably make it work with like a more manual, non-technology approach to field sales, but it's almost becoming par for the course or table stakes, right? To be able to compete in the field sales space in general, just having some sort of tool to be able to keep track of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So dovetailing into this question was, okay, so you think technology important, that might be a no-brainer, but how many different solutions are you actually using? This has been a number that's kind of grown over time. And and the numbers there are somewhat telling of that. So go ahead, Trey.
This is an interesting one because, like, coming from the software technology world, we use a ton of tools for our sales team. We're in the 6+ category, right? And I think, like, as a software company, technology company, we're a little bit earlier to adopt technology than a lot of other industries. And so I know across the software companies, I bet if you talk to every one of them, 3/4 are at the 6+. But when you flip over to field sales, it's a little bit of a laggard, I guess, or just like, they're not quite in that phase of 6+, tools. But that's where it's heading. When I started Spadio, 10, so like we might be the only thing companies had, and now it's becoming more and more important to have these specialized tools for different parts of your sales process, and you kind of see down there below like what some of the most popular ones are, in terms of what the report said or what the respondents said that they're using, right? And so as a high performing sales company, like on the previous slide, they say technology is extremely important. You flip over to this side, the high performing companies are using more technologies in their stack, and they're probably seamlessly integrated, so the information passes. I'll let Danny chime in on that because he's our local expert and works with our customers on that side of things. But yeah, technology is important, and the high performing teams are using more of it.
Yeah, the kind of like internal analogy I like to make when I see stats like this, right, is like, think back to when you got your first cell phone, right? Everybody, when they had a cell phone back in the day, like the first ones, all it was like, calling, maybe texting kind of came out a little bit after that. But then if you think about the modern day smartphone with all of the different apps that you use and softwares that you're constantly, ingrained in, right? It's kind of like this chart times 10, right? It started out with like a very simple thing. Maybe back in the day, that's all I needed was calling and texting. But now to live in this modern world of social media and all the different apps that exist, right? You're easily past that 6+ number with just your own personal device, right? And that's just the evolution from like a consumer side of things. If you think about the evolution from businesses, it's pretty much the same thing. There used to be a point where you maybe had one software or one system, and we kind of already hit on that with some of the original Spadio customers. But now it's not only how many systems do I have, it's how efficiently can they talk to each other, right? If you think of that sales rep experience coming in and you say, hey, welcome to our team, here's the 6+ different apps that we use and how to log in and how to interact with them. I mean, it's not feasible. And that honestly can probably attribute to some of those sales rep turnover numbers that we see, right? So teams that we're seeing in a modern day world just want to have they need these different softwares in the 6+ range, but they need them to be able to be user friendly and interact with each other in a way that complements them, right? So many times we see companies and customers that come in and start using Spadio, and they just feel this need to bolt it on or have it work with all these other systems. But very rarely do companies take a step back and really kind of think about that user experience from what their sales reps are actually being required to put in and do and interact with on a daily basis. And I think that's where there's a big area of opportunity, right? Just simplifying that sales rep experience and making it where this app is no longer a burden to do their job, but this technology that we're giving them is helpful and saving them time in the field and giving them more of that in-person, face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, well, that actually perfectly aligns with our next and last slide, which is what are the reasons people are choosing certain types of technology? What are the factors that you weight more heavily when evaluating different technology providers? Right at the top of the list is user experience.
Yes,
Trey, do you want
it's not easy to
go ahead?
use.
Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, so just to talk more about that, right? I always like to, whenever we're talking through a feature or something we want to do in Spadio, I always like to pretend I'm a field rep out in the field trying to do my job for the first time, and does this make sense, right? So especially when it comes to technology and solutions that business owners invest in to improve their company and improve their team, I think that's the important piece to keep in mind. And I'm glad it's on the top of the list, right? Is just what is my sales rep and team going to interact with on a daily basis? Is it easy to understand? Is it something that I could put in the hands of a new rep or somebody that's new to the field sales space and have them efficiently use in a way that makes their job easier, but then also gives me at the admin level everything I want, right? Because we're not just investing in tools for the hell of it. It's mostly to improve our business and our processes, and really just kind of putting yourself in that sales rep's shoes and envisioning what they're going to be interacting with on a daily basis, I think just gives you a great perception and mindset to have when looking at these different technologies that you use.
Thought the interesting point was like the last one was price. So what that tells me is like companies are willing to invest significant amount of money if the other things line up, you know. And so what I'm looking at when I buy technology, of course, is like I think integration options is really important because we talked about like how well those talk. Features and capabilities, obviously, flexibility and configurability. You probably have a unique sales process, and so how does that piece of software align with your process? Number two is probably the number one. Number two is the number one thing I've heard customers say over the years. I just need visibility into what's going on. It's actually what kind of drove me to create Spodio. Is had this field sales team with really no visibility what was going on out in the field, and we wanted to be able to help and coach them to be more effective. And so that's a really important one. Here's the bottom line though, take Spodio out of it. Any technology that you get, you have to be committed to implementing. Again, it doesn't matter what it is, Spodio, anything else. It takes time. And as a leader, as a company, it has to be there's a line in the sand. We have made this decision to implement this software and we're going to do it. And you need to set aside months of dedication. Like we bought a new technology in January for our customer success team, you know, and we're still dialing it in, you know, this time later. It's a long-term investment. This isn't something, any technology, right? I'm not just talking about Spodio. You don't just come in, buy it, and then 2 weeks later, you start to reap the rewards. You know, have realistic expectations on the investment that you're going to make as a company. Because when you come with that mindset, the longer term mindset, and you're committed to it, yeah, you will see a return on your investment.
Yeah, we used to call that the magic wand principle, right? It's like too many people look at technologies and think just because I'm paying for this, I can wave a magic wand and it's going to solve all of my problems, right? But to Trey's point, I mean, there's really no technology out there, especially for a business, right? One that you're going to run your business or manage your sales reps on. There's really no technology out there that's like that. It's a lot of change management. You know, even if you have the best tech stack in the world, you have to have realistic expectations on how long it's going to take to get this ingrained into my, you know, sales reps day-to-day lives, right? Because at the end of the day, we see it all the time. It's like our most successful Spodio users are the ones that have invested obviously in Spodio, but then also in the time to make sure that this is, to Trey's point, a line in the sand. This is how we do business. We used to have a saying, if it didn't happen in Spodio, it didn't happen. And so regardless of what your tech stack and solutions are, I think too many companies have that magic wand mindset of, hey, I bought this, so naturally all my problems are going to be solved. But in reality, it takes a lot more to actually implement and make that a part of your day-to-day process, right?
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to say on this slide before we cut over to questions is, you know, if the alternatives to Spodio and other fields, other solutions that have been optimized for field sales, were any good, if the reps in the field were actually using those things, then we wouldn't necessarily have as strong of a business case. But we know that you know, using Salesforce on the road on a mobile phone, or using another CRM that's kind of built for more of a desktop solution, when you're in a car is not great. And so that user experience, you can invest anything you want into your solution, but if your reps at the end of the day are just not going to use it, you're not going to be successful with that. So, okay. Cool. We do have some really good questions already in the chat. Please feel free to continue to put those in. A lot of people are asking, hey, can we get the presentation? By attending this webinar, you're actually going to get a recording of this yourself. So feel free to share that with anyone you'd like. And then you can email me I'm going to put my email in the chat. Email me at christian@spodio.com. and I can send you a PDF version of this presentation. In addition, you'll be getting a copy of the report as the follow-up as well. So, all right, let's jump to the questions. Here's a really good one. What are the top 5 high impact activities that you found directly contributed to revenue generation?
The top 5 high impact. Well, I think that obviously the in-person visit or stop by. I feel like we need to dive deeper to this question because it could just be calls, text, emails, and visits would be like the probably the most, but I feel like Lenny wanted more than that. Danny, are you seeing anything different?
The main thing I can think of, it might be related more towards like, the market saturate, like when you multiple attempts at the same activity, right? So we deal with a ton of companies that value, in-person interactions, knocking doors or going to different businesses, but don't necessarily track or manage that, right? So I would argue the most valuable activity that your field sales team can be doing is just logging where they've been, when they went there, and making sure that they're following back up, right? Because a ton of field sales teams leave too much meat on the bone or food on the table, right? When it comes to actual prospecting. So it's less of which activity is the most valuable, because I would say in person is the most valuable, but more of how many of those in person interactions are you actually doing at each of your potential prospects to really make sure you're effectively working your different prospects in the field, right?
Yeah. I can take a
Yeah,
stab at
I
this
think
one
that's
actually. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I could take a stab at this because we did a similar talk track at a conference earlier this year, Trey, and the research that we did with our own audience members and externally, taking different stages of the funnel. The number of in-person, if you're doing canvassing or if you're doing appointments, the number of visits or face-to-face interactions you have with your prospects or customers is 100% the most valuable or high impact activity. So whatever you can do to maximize that and get in front of people more frequently, that's the reason you have a field sales team to begin with, is for that. The next piece, as Danny mentioned, is that follow-up. Research shows that you're not going to go and close someone in one visit. And a lot of reps, unfortunately, the majority of reps actually, they don't follow up effectively. That's the number one reason why deals do not progress through your sales pipeline. It takes on average 8 interactions. That's in person, email, phone call, text message, whatever. Send them a letter to get someone to close on average based on our research. It's kind of skipping ahead. I think another really good one that we define that we are huge advocates for is referrals. You have happy customers that you've already created. Why not weaponize them and try to get more out of that? Studies show again that your customers that come from your referral program they're going to spend more money and they're going to convert a lot more quickly because you've already done a lot of the heavy lifting from building credibility standpoint. So there's probably a couple more I could find, but off the cuff, those are the 3 that kind
That's
of
good.
Yep.
Yeah, nice. I think I wanted to highlight the follow up and having, again, like I mentioned, done field sales and now seen hundreds or thousands of companies come through, is like field sellers are just horrible at follow up. And so, like, if there's one thing that you could do, Lenny, is like just understand, like, if I'm going to dedicate to an area or a number of businesses or whatever, and like just stick with them and follow up and go back and get their information, follow up via email, phone, text, whatever, and use that to tee back up, getting in person. So if there's one thing I would do that would be high impact, it's that, and then ask for referrals because they just close at a much higher rate.
Yep.
Jonathan, you've mentioned P21. I Googled that and it said Epicor, which is an ERP. So I'm assuming you mean that ERP. Danny, you do a lot of our integrations.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody that integrates with that?
So not particularly P21, but we do have tons of customers that integrate with just other ERP systems. So just on the Epicor P21 website that I was just looking at as well, it does look like they have what's called a REST API, which is basically the backend mechanism that allows us to integrate to them. So Spadio has the same type of API. So I would say it is possible to integrate with P21 just off of the initial glance. But it would be something that we could definitely follow up with you on if you're more interested in hearing like actually how we would go about setting that up.
Yeah, I can think more broadly, the interoperability component, right? That's one thing that we hear pretty often. Just making sure that if you're going to choose a solution, you may want to make another technology change 6 months from then, or 2 years from then, or even 5 years from then. Making sure that you have a solution in place that's flexible enough to adapt to different system requirements and different integrations is it's pretty critical to that process. Catherine is asking, how has the evolution of new digital technology in the field sales space impacted the current state of field sales? We've reported on this over the past 4 years. How has that trend of technology specifically geared towards field sales impacted the overall trends and direction of this industry?
Yeah, I can
I'd
jump
have
in
to go
and
back and, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, comparing Spodio from almost 10 years ago to now, what we've kind of seen and heard is, we just saw like how many technologies people, one, not only how much they prioritize and value it, but also how many, on average, most companies are using, right? So I would say that the way it's changed field sales in a lot of ways is it's given people more tools that, again, have been designed to improve their business processes, make their lives easier, and make them more money. But at the same time, it's also kind of created, new challenges, right? In the past, it was just, hey, I need to get people out there knocking doors, visiting businesses, and my business will grow from there. Now it's, I need to have systems and softwares in place that, if used right, will complement the field sales motion. So I definitely think my overall takeaway is that it's improved the field sales industry. It's just shifted it towards what used to be important to now being more of a technology focused, like, hey, how are all of my different systems talking to each other, and are they efficiently working for my team in the field?
Yeah, I think from just anecdotally over the years, like when I first, got going with Spodio, the objection was like, "Hey, we have a CRM or ERP, and that's all our team needs." And the market is realizing that no, that's incorrect. Like if I really want to optimize the amount of selling time that my reps get, I'm going to have to enable them with more than just a basic database, right? And so that's why you see those high performing teams are getting 3, 4, 5, 6 plus, technologies and putting them together in order to expand out on that face to face and virtual selling time.
Awesome. We have time probably for one more. Let's try to make this one a quick one if we can. I don't know if maybe it's a little big, but we'll try. Do you have any indication, based on the information that you have access to, that the challenges that we were describing earlier, they're going to become easier over the next year? I mean, what's the trajectory for those challenges?
Boy, if I could read that, I would definitely start investing in the stock market. Probably. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's. Is this the new reality that we live with? I think for our B2C customers, there's got to be some sort of loosening of the interest rate at some point, I would think, as it goes down, and maybe they can increase qualification rates. On the B2B side, I think it's the purse strings are loosening. We've seen that, just from the people that the companies we deal with. Some of them are starting to open back up and look to invest more. So yeah, I would say yes, it has to, right? We're not going to stay in this challenging time forever. But we had a pretty good, coming out of COVID 2021, 2022. It was like pretty awesome. Like it was easy, right? And now maybe we're back to a level where we're just going to have to be better. We're just going to have to be better. So guess what? If you set up your processes and you're hiring everything to be excellent in this time, what's going to happen when times get better? You're going to kick ass and take names. And so you're going to be at the top. This is a shakeout period right now, right? As a company, you're either rising to the challenge and you're making decisions and investing in areas that are going to make you better, or you're not and your competitors are, and you're going to be left in the dust. So regardless of what happens in the economy, let's just pretend like this is our new normal, and let's go out there and figure out how to win now.
Yeah, and then the one thought I'll add to that too is, and we had kind of this epiphany back when Chat GPT and AI really started kind of taking shape. I think in a world where so much technology, whether it's artificial intelligence or just the way that the world is evolving so rapidly, I think that field sales is honestly becoming a more valuable art form, if you will, right? In a world where you could have a robot that knows everything about you, calling you or analyzing your history online, right? Something about that in person, like you can't really fake field sales or automate it, right? It's, at the end of the day, it's an in-person interaction with a human being. And I definitely think we're right on the cusp of seeing that kind of we already can kind of see its value with how much companies' revenue has grown year over year. But just in a world that's ever more getting more and more technology driven and artificial intelligence, I think that field sales in person piece is always going to be valuable.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
All
It's
right.
like I used to get, the spam email. How many emails do we get a day? I get like almost 200, right? And so like that face to face in person is more valuable than ever. Good point, Danny.
Yeah, so with that, we are actually out of time. I know we got one person that we didn't get to, so please do email me, and we'll try to take as much of that offline. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. If you'd like to find out more information about Spadio, or if you just want to learn more about what we're doing over here at the Inside Scoop and Outside Sales podcast, here's some information for you. We are available. The podcast is available on all major platforms, YouTube included, if you like seeing our pretty faces. Thank you guys so much for this. This is a fantastic webinar. I really appreciate Trey and Danny, you both, for adding your insights, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah,
Thank y'all.
definitely. Thanks, everyone.